The First Republic of Armenia, known at the time of its existence as the Republic of Armenia, was the first modern Armenian state since the fall of the Kingdom of Cilicia in 1375. The republic was established in the Armenian-populated territories of the disintegrated Russian Empire, known as Eastern Armenia or Russian Armenia. The leaders of the government came mostly from the Armenian Revolutionary Federation. The First Republic of Armenia bordered the Democratic Republic of Georgia to the north, the Ottoman Empire to the west, Persia to the south, and the Azerbaijan Democratic Republic to the east. It had a total land area of roughly 70,000 square kilometers, and a population of 1.3 million. The Armenian National Council under the leadership of Aram Manukyan declared the independence of Armenia on 28 May 1918. From the very onset, Armenia was plagued with a variety of domestic and foreign problems. A humanitarian crisis emerged from the aftermath of the Armenian genocide as tens of thousands of Armenian refugees from the Ottoman Empire settled there. The republic lasted for over 2 years, during which time it was involved in several armed conflicts caused by territorial disputes. By late 1920, the nation was conquered by the Soviet Red Army. The First Republic, along with the Republic of Mountainous Armenia which repelled the Soviet invasion until July 1921, ceased to exist as an independent state, superseded by the Armenian Soviet Socialist Republic that became part of the Soviet Union in 1922. After the fall of the Soviet Union, the republic regained its independence as the current Republic of Armenia in 1991. Background: the Russian offensive during the Caucasus campaign of World War I and subsequent occupation and the creation of a provisional administrative government gave hope for ending Ottoman Turkish rule in Western Armenia. With the help of several battalions of Armenians recruited from the Russian Empire, the Russian army had made progress on the Caucasus front, advancing as far as the city of Erzurum in 1916. The Russians continued to make considerable advances even after the toppling of Tsar Nicholas II in February 1917. In March 1917, the spontaneous revolution that toppled Tsar Nicholas and the Romanov dynasty established a caretaker administration, known as the Provisional Government. Shortly after, the Provisional Government replaced Grand Duke Nicholas' administration in the Caucasus with the 5-member Special Transcaucasian Committee, known by the acronym Ozarkom. The Ozarkom included Armenian Democrat Mikhail Papajanian, and was set to heal wounds inflicted by the old regime. In doing so, Western Armenia was to have a general commissar and was to be subdivided into the districts of Trebizond, Erzurum, Bitlis, and Van. The decree was a major concession to the Armenians. Western Armenia was placed under the central government and through it under immediate Armenian jurisdiction. Dr. Hakov Zavriv would serve as the assistant for civil affairs, and he in turn would see to it that most civil officials were Armenian. In October 1917, the Bolsheviks seized power from the provisional government and announced that they would be withdrawing troops from both the Western and Caucasus fronts. The Georgians, Armenians and Muslims of the Caucasus all rejected the Bolsheviks' legitimacy towards independence. On December 5, 1917, the Armistice of Erzincan was signed between the Ottoman Empire and the Transcaucasian Commissariat, ending armed conflict. After the Bolshevik seizure of power, a multinational Congress of Transcaucasian representatives met to create a provisional regional executive body known as Transcaucasian Sejm. The Commissariat and the Sejm were heavily encumbered by the pretense that the South Caucasus formed an integral unit of a non-existent Russian democracy. The Armenian deputies in the Sejm were hopeful that the anti-Bolshevik forces in Russia would prevail in the Russian Civil War and rejected any idea of separating from Russia. In February 1918, the Armenians Georgians and Muslims had reluctantly joined to form the Transcaucasian Federation, but disputes among all the three groups continued as unity began to falter. On March 3, 1918, the Russians followed the Armistice of Azerbaijan with the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, and left the war. It ceded territory from March 14 to April 1918, when a conference was held between the Ottoman Empire and the delegation of the Sejm. Under the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk, the Russian allowed the Turks to retake the western Armenian provinces, as well as to take over the provinces of Kars, Batum, and Ardahan. Having killed many and deported the Armenians of Western Armenia during the Armenian Genocide, the Ottoman Empire intended to eliminate the Armenian population of Eastern Armenia. Shortly after the signing of Brest-Litovsk, the Turkish army began its advance, taking Erzurum in March and Kars in April. Beginning on May 21, the Ottoman army moved ahead again. On May 11, 1918, a new peace conference opened at Batum. At this conference, the Ottomans extended their demands to include Tiflis, as well as Alexandropol and Etchmiadzin, which they wanted for a railroad to be built to connect Kars and Julfa with Baku. The Armenian and Georgian members of the Republic's delegation began to stall. On May 26, 1918, Georgia declared independence. On May 28, it signed the Treaty of Potter, and received protection from Germany. The following day, the Muslim National Council in Tiflis announced the establishment of the Democratic Republic of Azerbaijan. Having been abandoned by its regional allies, the Armenian National Council, based in Tiflis and led by Russian Armenian intellectuals who represented Armenian interests in the Caucasus, declared its independence on May 28. It dispatched Hovhannes Khachazniuni and Alexander Kataisian, both members of the ARF, to Yerevan to take over power and issued the following statement on May 30. In view of the dissolution of the political unity of Transcaucasia and the new situation created by the proclamation of the independence of Georgia and Azerbaijan, the Armenian National Council declares itself to be the supreme and only administration for the Armenian provinces. Because of the certain grave circumstances, the National Council, deferring until the near future the formation of an Armenian national government, temporarily assumes all governmental functions, in order to take hold the political and administrative helm of the Armenian provinces. Meanwhile, the Turks had taken Alexandropol, and were intent on eliminating the center of Armenian resistance based in Yerevan. The Armenians were able to stave off total defeat and delivered crushing blows to the Turkish army in the battles of Sadarapat, Karakalisa and Abaran. The Republic of Armenia had to sue for negotiations at Treaty of Batum, which was signed in Batum on June 4, 1918. It was the ADR's first treaty. After the Ottoman Empire took vast swathes of territory and imposed harsh conditions, the new republic was left with 10,000 square kilometers. Administration. On May 30, 1918, the Armenian Revolutionary Federation had decided that Armenia should be a republic under a provisional coalition government. The declaration stated that the Republic of Armenia was to be a self-governing state, endowed with a constitution, the supremacy of state authority, independence, sovereignty, and plenipotentiary power. Khachazniuni became the country's first prime minister and Aram Manoukian was the first minister of interior. Armenia established a Ministry of Interior and created a police force. The Armenian parliament passed a law on the police on April 21, 1920, specifying its structure, jurisdiction, and responsibilities. The Interior Ministry was also responsible for communications and telegraph, railroad, and the public school system. In addition to enforcing law and order, the reforms come soon and each of these departments became ministries. In 1919, the leaders of the Republic had to deal with issues on three fronts. domestic, regional, and international. The Armenian Congress of Eastern Armenians that took control in 1918 fell apart, and in June 1919, the first national elections were held. The establishment of law was a problem. Armenians had the most organized structure in their homeland, however. Several other ethnic groups had been settled for many centuries in these lands, too. During the 1920s, which began under the premiership of Caucasian, Armenians from the former Russian Empire and United States developed the judicial system. January 1919 was an important milestone as the country's first state university was founded. Speakers of the Parliament of Republic of Armenia Avatog Zaharonyan, Hovhannes Kachaznaunai. Prime Ministers in the Republic of Armenia: Hovhannes Kachaznaunai, Alexander Katazian, Hamazasp, Hamo Oanjanyan, Simon Vratjan. Military. Thanks to the efforts of Armenian National Council of Tiflis, an Armenian military corps was established to fight against the Ottoman offensive of late 1917 and early 1918. Units of this corps formed the basis of the DRA's army. In accordance with the harsh terms of the Treaty of Batum signed on June 14, 1918, the Ottoman Empire permitted the Armenian army to maintain just a single infantry division. Hovhannes Hakverdian, Christopher Araratov, Ruben Terminasian, Drastomat Kanayan. Total number of military personnel: Administrative Division. The Republic included the following areas of the former Russian Empire divisions. Population. Before World War I, in 1914, the territory was part of Russian Armenia and among the total Armenian population of 2,800,000. About 1,500,000 lived in the Ottoman Empire, and the remainder were in the Russian Armenia. An estimate in 1918, during the new Armenian Republic's first year, indicated that there were 800,000 Armenians and more than 100,000 Muslims, which included mostly Ottoman Turks, Antiziri Turks and Kurds everywhere else. Of the 800,000 Armenians, about 500,000 were native Russian Armenians and 300,000 were destitute and starving refugees fleeing from the massacres that took place in the Ottoman Empire. The surviving Armenian population in 1919 was 2,500,000, which 2 million were distributed in the Caucasus. Out of these 2 million in the Caucasus, 1,300,000 were to be found within the boundaries of the new Republic of Armenia, which included 300,000 to 350,000 refugees who had escaped from the Ottoman Empire. There were 1,650,000 Armenians in the new Republic. Also added to this Armenian population were 350,000 to 400,000 people of other nationalities, and a total population of about 2 million within the Armenian Republic. The surviving Armenian population in 1921 was 1,200,000 in the Republic, 400,000 in Georgia, 340,000 Azerbaijan, and with the other regions in the Caucasus adds to 2,195,000. Refugee problem. There was also an Armenian settlement problem that brought conflict with other ethnic residents. In all, there were over 300,000 embittered and impatient Armenian refugees escaping from the Ottoman Empire, which were now the government's responsibility. This proved an insurmountable humanitarian issue. Typhus was a major sickness because of its effect on children. Conditions in the outlying regions, not necessarily consisting of refugees, weren't any better. The Ottoman governing structure and Russian army had already withdrawn from the region. The Armenian government had neither time nor resources to rebuild the infrastructure. The 393,700 refugees were under their jurisdiction as follows. The government of Hovhannes Kachazny was faced with the most sobering reality in the winter of 1918-19. The newly formed government was responsible for over 500,000 Armenian refugees in the Caucasus. It was a long and harsh winter. The homeless masses, lacking food, clothing and medicine, had to endure the elements. Many who survived the exposure and famine succumbed to the ravaging diseases. By the spring of 1919, the typhus epidemic had run its course. The weather improved and the first American Committee for Relief in the Near East shipment of wheat reached Batum. The British Army transported the aid to Yerevan. Yet by that time some 150,000 of the refugees had perished. Bratjan puts this figure at around 180,000, or nearly 20% of the entire nascent republic. A report in early 1919 noted that 65% of the population of Sadarabad, 40% of the population of 8 villages near Echmiadzin and 25% of the population of Ashtarak had died. Foreign relations. In 1920, the Republic of Armenia administered an area that covered most of present-day Armenia, Kars, Igdir, and the Cholda and Gol districts of Ardahan, while the regions of Nakhichevan, Nagorno-Karabakh, Zangezur, and Kazakh were disputed and fought over with Azerbaijan. The Olchu region was also claimed by Armenia. The majority Armenian area of Lori was disputed with and administered by Georgia. The areas south of Yerevan, which were populated by Muslims, did not acknowledge Armenian authority and resisted attempts by the Armenian government to assert its control over those regions. Nevertheless, after the signing of the Treaty of Chevreuse in 1920, Armenia was granted formal international recognition. The United States, as well as some South American countries, officially opened diplomatic channels with the government. Numerous Armenian missions were also established in Great Britain, Italy, Germany, Serbia, Greece, Iran, Japan and Africa. Georgian Armenian War. In December 1918, Armenia and Georgia engaged in the Georgian Armenian War 1918, which was a brief military conflict over the disputed border areas in the largely Armenian-populated Lori and Akarkalak districts along with some other neighboring regions. Both nations claimed the districts, which Georgia had occupied after the Ottomans evacuated the area. Inconclusive fighting continued for 2 weeks. The Armenian offensive under Drastamat Kanayan made substantial gains in the first 10 days. By December 25 they had reached positions 30 miles from Tiflis, when the Allied representatives in Tiflis finally intervened. The draft British plan established that Georgian troops would remain in Akarkalak and northern Borshulu, whereas Armenian forces would settle in southern Borshulu, and the British would take positions between the two opponents. This forced Armenians to relinquish their gains during the war. Georgia accepted the plan and the Allies decided to impose it with or without the approval of the government of Armenia. Finally, hostilities stopped on December 31 when the parties agreed to the British-brokered ceasefire. British mediation facilitated the end of the war, and resulted in the establishment of joint Armeno-Georgian civil administration in the Lori Neutral Zone, or the Shulavera Condominium. Relations between Armenia and Georgia, however, remained tense. In the spring of 1919, American relief agency officials began to complain that Georgian officials, who demanded their own share of the provisions, were holding up railway traffic carrying vital supplies of flour and other foodstuffs to Armenia. Moved by their complaints and the debilitating food crisis in Armenia, George Clemenceau, as president of the Versailles Conference, issued a protest letter on July 18, calling on Georgia to cease further interference. Georgia issued its own protest to this communique, but by the 25th of July American officials were already reporting that rail traffic had begun to pick up. In autumn 1919, the two countries began negotiations for a new transit treaty. Armenian-Azerbaijan War. A considerable degree of hostility existed between Armenia and its new neighbor to the east, the Democratic Republic of Azerbaijan, stemming largely from racial, religious, cultural and societal differences. The Azeris had close ethnic and religious ties to the Turks and had provided material support for them in the drive to Baku in 1918. Although the borders of the two countries were still undefined, Azerbaijan claimed most of the territory Armenia was sitting on, demanding all or most parts of the former Russian provinces of Elizabethpol, Tiflis, Yerevan, Kars and Batum. As diplomacy failed to accomplish compromise, even with the mediation of the commanders of a British expeditionary force that had installed itself in the Caucasus, territorial clashes between Armenia and Azerbaijan took place throughout 1919 and 1920, most notably in the regions of Nakhichevan, Karabakh and Syanik. Repeated attempts to bring these provinces under Azerbaijani jurisdiction were met with fierce resistance by their Armenian inhabitants. In May 1919, DRO led an expeditionary unit that was successful in establishing Armenian administrative control in Nakhichevan, Southwest Caucasian Republic. While problems with Azerbaijan continued, a new state headed by Fakhaldin Piryoflu and centered in Kars, the Southwest Caucasian Republic, was established. It claimed the territory around the regions of Kars and Batum, the Nakhichevan and Sharoa districts of the Yerevan province and the Akaraltsika and Akarkalaki districts of the Tiflis province. It existed alongside the British general governorship created during the Entente's intervention in Transcaucasia. It was abolished by British High Commissioner Admiral Somerset Arthur Gough Calthorpe in April 1919, and the region was assigned to the Armenian Republic. Treaty of Chevreuse. The Treaty of Chevreuse was signed between the Allied and Associated Powers and Ottoman Empire at Chevreuse, France on August 10, 1920. The treaty included a clause on Armenia. It made all parties signing the treaty recognize Armenia as a free and independent state. The drawing of definite borders was, however, left to President Woodrow Wilson and the United States State Department, and was only presented to Armenia on November 22. The new borders gave Armenia access to the Black Sea and awarded large portions of the eastern provinces of the Ottoman Empire to the Republic.